Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Grant Smith and I'm the Communications Manager at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges through creative use of technology. For those of you who haven't attended a webinar session with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand facilitate a training calendar of online webinars, workshops, boot camps and webcons to help the social sector upskill in all digital areas. Please check out our training and education menu on our website for more events coming up online soon. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm on, the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land wherever you are. Today, I'm excited to welcome you to join the Digital Marketing Tactics all NFPs should be doing for their appeals session with Tim Brack, who is a digital marketing strategist. Sorry, Tim. Tim has more than 15 years experience running marketing campaigns and digital projects for clients, including nonprofits, education, IT sector, banking, construction, retail, healthcare, and professional services. Tim has broad digital experience working across a wide range of areas, including search, social, web, email, content strategy, analytics, and conversion optimization. So Tim really knows his stuff. He is committed to using data to inform strategies and create dashboards for client partners to see campaign performance in real time. The last thing before I go is a little bit of housekeeping. Please note all the lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type those into the questions box on your webinar panel and I will be able to assist. Most of them will be to do with your bandwidth, so please close any browsers or programs that you're not using, and the first port of call would always be to stop and restart this program. Look, we'd like to encourage you to ask as many questions as you can, so please do put those into the questions panel and Tim will answer them as he goes. The final thing to note is that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you in 1 to 2 business days. Thank you for joining us and I will now hand you over to Tim.
Super. Thanks so much for that, Grant. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining today for this go through of digital marketing tactics. So normally I have a kind of partner in crime, which is Samara in the team as well. So she's a digital fundraising specialist or strategist, I should say. But we kind of tend to split these, and normally we talk to each other about the materials that we'll cover. And she's doing other sessions that you can book on with Connecting Up as well. But today we're going to go through some really interesting kind of topics and some of the tactics we'll kind of look at. I'll just kind of say a really quick kind of point on Marlin. So, Marlin is a team of strategists, creatives, project managers, developers, digital experts, people like myself. And we specialize in the non-for-profit space and helping people in that space and organizations to achieve their objectives. We are also recruiting. So if you know anyone that's looking for a role in digital, then by all means, feel free to kind of pass them on. So today, digital marketing tactics, and let's kind of look at a breakdown of a few different areas. It's always a little bit difficult to pitch these sorts of sessions because some people joining will have a lot of experience and will know quite in depth what's kind of happening in the market. Other people will be very kind of new, or at least have a lot of other areas they have to prioritize and focus on, and digital is not an area they can necessarily dedicate a lot of time to. So they're on here to learn, and that's totally fine. Each area is no problems if you come with not much experience or a lot. Take out of today what you can. I'm always a big advocate for give yourself the space to be able to invest the time you can in digital and learn what you can, and don't get stressed out that you're not doing everything all at once, because if we try to do everything, it just means we're not going to do anything particularly well. I normally try to focus on particular areas, get it up to as well as I can, and then focus on another area after that, right? So don't kind of feel too pressured about what we talk about today as we go through social, search, email, websites, and a little bit on tracking as well. So the first point I think about digital, especially for the people that might have been watching some of the changes over the year, is a bit of an apology, I guess. I'm kind of sorry. Digital is just getting ridiculous, and this is because of some of the changes we've seen this year and some of the changes just in the industry and what digital marketing, digital fundraising kind of means we have to do, the hoops we have to kind of run through. And one that we saw this year, which was kind of prominent, was Apple with their changes that came out with the new iOS operating system 14.5 on iPhones. When that came out, Apple was saying, oh, hey, we're doing big tracking changes now. People have to opt in. And that kind of meant that pretty much every app on the App Store that's going to send traffic to a website, such as Facebook, where most of our campaigns are based, all of a sudden had to do jump through a lot of hoops themselves. So we have these opt-ins that people have to do, opt into tracking. And I think a lot of people, when they saw, Facebook would like to track you, would you be okay with that? The automatic answer was pretty much no, I would not be. And 95% of people also said no, because the trust there is not as there, the benefit for people is not necessarily there. So this kind of change led to a lot of things that we then had to do as people who advertise or use these platforms, verifying organizations, prioritizing our conversions, setting up a lot of the infrastructure inside the Facebook ad system itself, verifying domains, connecting all these little pieces together, the pixels, the pages, the ad accounts, the conversions, the aggregated event measurement, all these things, all these bits. And then at the end of it, we're kind of left with, okay, your costs have gone up, but the campaigns aren't necessarily performing as well as they have in years past. And this is something we kind of see across the board. It's not limited to nonprofit sector. It's something that I know a lot of people in the commercial sector have seen as well, where the campaigns just are not performing as strongly as they have in previous years. And a large part of that is because Facebook is this data beast where it needs a lot of data in order to try and pick and choose who is most likely to respond to this particular ad. Now, these changes are, don't get me wrong, they're great for privacy. They're just not so great for marketing and fundraising, which is kind of what we're, as advertisers, what we're using these platforms for. So it is a little bit of a tricky kind of balance to get right there. So I'm all for it in kind of one respect, and then my other part of me, which is trying to get good results out of campaigns, is a little bit disappointed that we now kind of have to adapt and shift our tactics so much to account for these changes. And this is just one change over the last kind of year. There were others as well. Others such as, again, just kind of limited to Facebook, they came out with the social ads policy, where there's a lot more kind of hoops you have to jump through to get ads live that may relate to environmental, education, health, homelessness, any one of these kind of issues, where we're dealing with a lot more ads that are getting flagged for disapproved. And we have to kind of go through a bit more of a process to see what's wrong, see if we need to change copy, submit for reviews, these sorts of changes. So digital is kind of hard. It's hard to get right, and it's hard to get right across the board. And I guess that the so what of kind of what I just kind of spoke about was just kind of illustrating a point that most organizations are really limited in terms of the skills, time, budget, experience, expertise that we have. And that's not limited to digital, that's across the board. And that's almost by nature is nonprofit organizations of what you have to go through. I haven't kind of come across a client yet which has said, hey, we are flush for people, so just let us do all the work and we're totally good for it. You just kind of give some advice. Normally it's a case of, hey, we're a bit stretched, we're really kind of trying hard. Recruitment, if you can get people on, is also really hard in the current market. So, we kind of have to work around this. And the kind of the flip side is digital is kind of constantly changing, and the areas are getting a lot deeper. And by deeper, I mean that, just the case of Facebook, if you kind of went back, 5 or 7 years, campaigns were easier to manage. Like what you could do inside Facebook wasn't as advanced as kind of what it is now. And even in some senses, we're kind of a bit more limited in what we can do with the data available. But each area is kind of really blooming into its own area of expertise. People who are experts in social campaigns, like paid social campaigns, people who are great community managers, or who might manage the organic kind of content, content marketers that are out there. People that are great at search, and even search splits into paid search and organic search, even though there's some kind of overlaps in your approach, but organic is a much kind of longer timescale effort, whereas paid search could be much shorter, where you can kind of see the results happening in much shorter timescale. So if this is kind of resonating with like, oh yeah, this is kind of a challenge, we're really challenged by a lot of this, My kind of default then is like, okay, well, that's okay. It's okay to find this difficult, especially if you are older and with not as much experience in digital. That is totally fine. I'd say, okay, come back and nail the fundamentals. So if this is a bit of a struggle for your organization or your team that's looking after fundraising or marketing communications, if that's the focus you have, then particularly for appeals, there's normally like, okay, there's a few things you can do, and we'll focus on doing them well and improving them from campaign to campaign. Not feeling like we have to do everything with every campaign, and not feeling like everything has to be perfect for every campaign. The most important point with digital is that you have something live, you have something out there, because you can iterate and test and learn as you go. Don't get me wrong, it can't be horrible, but as long as it's kind of good enough to be live, okay, now we can learn. Now we can see what messages work, what images work, what audiences work. We can iterate as we go. We can improve things. If we try to make things perfect, we're never going to be live. So nailing the fundamentals is things like, okay, paid social campaign. Let's set up on Facebook and Instagram. That's relatively, straightforward to do, to get up and started. We don't have to worry yet about platforms such as TikTok. And again, I'm talking quite generally. Most organizations don't need to worry about campaigns on there right now. The audiences skew younger. There's not quite the case there that there is, and the history of donation activity or appeals through TikTok there would be through Facebook and other platforms. So don't stress out that TikTok's the latest, greatest thing, and that you're not there and you're not posting all this kind of content, right? Because that will come. We're just going to get the fundamentals down. Because if you start diluting your spend across platforms, and if you start diluting your attention and where you're focusing your efforts when you're reviewing the campaigns, again, we can't do things extremely well when you're trying to do everything. So normally I'm just say, hey, give yourself a little bit of space. You can get there in the end, but don't try to do it all at once. All right, another one, simple paid search campaign. So we talk to a lot of our clients who have Google Ad Grants. If you haven't heard of Google Ad Grants, just do kind of a search. It's where Google will give certain types of nonprofits, which income tax exempt, so more or less most of the ones more than likely on this call, will give them a $10,000 a month in-kind spend on search ads. Fantastic to set up and use because it means you're kind of guaranteeing this more or less consistent amount of traffic that's coming through. And then you shift the pressure from being we don't have search traffic to being like, do we have the right content on our website? That's always a piece that we have to look at. But a simple campaign for an appeal would be, let's make sure we have our brand covered. So people are searching for us, they can find us and they can find our appeal. And then secondly, what about our cause as well? So if I was an animal charity, I'd be looking at, well, what searches should we have around, a winter appeal that relate to the animal that will drive people to the appeal page when they're searching for terms around, animals and animal welfare. Homelessness or homelessness awareness or any kind of issues that are happening in market. We want to drive people to the appeal page at certain times of the year. So a pretty simple campaign there. There's only kind of a couple of different groupings of ads we might have or groupings of keywords we might have. And the third one is just simple emails, supporting the appeal. It might be a little journey or whatever it is, but it's just don't feel like it has to be incredibly designed. Don't feel like it has to be just segmented down to 40 different audiences. It's again just giving yourself the space to, okay, we're at least sending out some emails this time, and then in the next appeal, okay, let's kind of break down that audience a little bit further. Let's see what else we can add to it as we kind of go through. Okay, so again, if you're kind of struggling with digital or just not kind of seeing the results, it's kind of just saying, all right, let's just kind of get some of the basics right. If you and your team are nailing all this and you're totally fine, that's where you can start going through some of the areas we'll talk about a little bit as well, such as testing and experimentation. And this is kind of a really important point of again, another benefit for digital is it can be pretty quick to get things up and running. So get ads up, get search ads live, that sort of thing. If you're not testing and improving over time, it's kind of like, well, that's one of the main benefits of digital. The main points is that you can have two ads going to the same audience at the same time, and you can see which one does better, which one gets more volume of donations, which one gets the cheapest cost per donation. which message resonates, which image resonates the most with the audience we're going to. That's kind of a really big point of digital, is the test and learn, which can be done with small budgets. It doesn't require you to have, a $20,000, $40,000 spend on a single appeal, right? It can be done with limited budgets of even just, $1,000 or a couple $1,000s. So testing and learning is kind of really, really big thing. And if you're kind of stretched on time, or if you're just feeling stretched, just focus on one area and just be like, okay, cool. Well, for a Christmas appeal, let's look at our emails and just see like, how can we test in there? How can we iterate and learn? Our next one, maybe it's you pay more attention to social and just decide that, okay, we're going to have, 3 or 4 different ads, run them for a few weeks, and then maybe we'll iterate and introduce another couple and just see how they perform based on, what we see happens to the first batch of ads. Okay, so again, it's not necessarily that everything has to be running. It's like a big kind of, A/B split testing campaign across every channel, across every appeal, because we're not necessarily all resourced to do that in terms of time or in terms of skills and expertise. So again, give yourself the space to be able to say, all right, our strategy is for the next 3 years, we're going to learn in each of these channels, and we're going to develop more expertise as we go and take our learnings and apply it to the next campaign and the next campaign after that, because we know there's always going to be another appeal to come, and probably really quickly. So we better jump on this train as we can. So what we've done with this presentation then is just kind of put together some tactical tips, some kind of practical things that you can look at, that you can do. We don't necessarily dive into an incredible amount of detail on these topics. We definitely don't, because there's an hour, and because some of these might require like, a day to go into a lot of detail. So what we'll likely do is probably create a few more presentations or a few more webinars over quite specific topics. It could be optimizing your donation page. It could be about email journeys or another tracking another particular piece we might talk about in a little bit more depth. But for now, it's probably a little bit more general, and we're just picking a few different kind of parts to talk about. All right. So the first one is social campaigns. And that's just kind of where we're going to pick out some of the paid social elements here. And I'll talk about paid social campaigns mainly because that's where the bulk of the activity is going to come from. When we're talking about driving traffic to our appeal or to our site, organic is kind of okay to have there, but Facebook, and I'm talking mainly about Facebook here, but those platforms mainly operate on a pay for results basis. It's the whole concept of organic reach is just degraded over time to be more or less like it doesn't have a significant impact on a campaign. So if we're thinking about paid campaigns and who we're going to target, the kind of real first kind of piece there is break up your audiences. And this is conversations that I've had with people recently, where it's if you're going to set up a campaign for an appeal, the temptation is just let's do it as simply as possible, which would be one campaign, one audience, 1 or 2 ads. One of the problems when you're grouping all your audiences together is you're not really sure how do different audiences perform. So if I'm grouping people who already know me, it's a remarketing audience. I'll talk about that in a moment. And maybe people who are interested in the cause, I'm just going to lump them together. I'm not really sure which one of those, like maybe one of them performed really well, the people who know me, and maybe the other one performed not so well. And I can't see the difference there because when it's grouped in one audience, those differences are just averaged out and we can't see the relative performance. So the kind of tip there is just rather than targeting everyone in one kind of big group, it's just to kind of break it up. Break up your ad sets, which is your grouping of audiences. Break up your ad sets so that you can look at and learn from, well, how do those different audiences perform? What does this group look like for volume? What does this other group look like for efficiency? And by volume and efficiency, those are really things like the number of donations and the amount of revenue coming through. Something like efficiency is more about the cost per donation, for example, and the average donation value. So how much money do I have to pay to get one donation from 3 different groups? All right, now I can actually have a really good point of comparison between those 3. And with that whole learn over time, it might be like, okay, for this appeal, we're going to test this type of audience. It might be people who are interested in social impact and social causes for a homelessness campaign. And I want to see how does that compare? How does that group compare to another group where they might have a different kind of profile, a different interest group. Maybe they're interested in other organizations that are similar to my organization, that work in a similar space. And I might kind of compare those two audiences to see, okay, what is my difference with how much I have to pay to get a donation between those two audiences. Again, if we don't break them out, we can't see that level of detail in the results. So it's just a nice kind of way to split it out to see the performance. And just some ideas on that. So normally when we work with organizations, we'll look and say, okay, well, what warm audiences do we have access to? And the warm audience would be people who already know you, and they may have already interacted with your organization. I put interacted there, just kind of a mark around it, because the interaction could be something that's fantastic, like, oh, hey, they're a donor. They have, they've been a one-off or a regular giver on a previous campaign, in which case, fantastic. Or it could be, a much lower down, or I guess less friction, or like a much weaker interaction, weaker in the sense of it's not as much of a signal of intent. All this with warm audiences, by the way, it's called remarketing. This all just kind of falls under the remarketing banner. And those people could be, okay, well, it could be donors, it could be just email contacts. So that could be e-newsletter or other kind of contacts that you've accumulated over time through other, lead generation or other kind of activities. It could be people that have engaged with you on social. And it's probably one group where I'd say the interaction there is not as strong as a donor who, has bought into the messaging you put out there, and they're clearly aligned with the cause for that to happen. It could be your volunteers. Maybe they're a great mechanism for sharing content, or even potentially for some donation. It could be people that come to your website, or even people that have done community fundraising for you in the past as well. So these are all types of audiences we could target with remarketing. Not just through Facebook, but through other methods as well. So each ad platform will allow you to create audiences to remarket to. Website visitors is a really interesting one, especially if your website spans multiple stakeholder groups, which of course most of our websites do. So that might be where you say, okay, well, let's actually isolate part of our website. Let's just take the people that went to the donation page but didn't actually donate. Then let's remarket to those people, because we know that the intent, clearly there was some intent there, and potentially they got distracted, or something happened, or they just inertia happened and they just didn't finish the transaction. So it is possible to go back to those people and pull them back, serve them with another ad to see, hey, can we get that group in particular back to donate or to do the action we'd like them to do. Cold audiences is another one where I'd say, well, they don't necessarily know about your organization. Maybe they do. That kind of depends on how strong your brand is in a particular market, and just if people have heard or not. But this would be based around your knowledge of the interests and demographics that you think will align with your appeal. So the messaging we have, the imagery we have, who is most likely to respond in market. Again, the great thing about social and digital, you can test. You can say, okay, here's my assumption. Well, I'm going to kind of challenge that assumption. And maybe you're quite tight with your age or gender targeting on Facebook, and you might open up a little more and just see the results, because you can see some of the breakdown by age and gender. And so you can kind of just test around and see which groups will actually resonate. So with cold audiences, I'd normally kind of group, again, related ones together. So I kind of mentioned before, again, like if there's people around social impact, social change, social justice, that could potentially be one group. It could be homelessness. When you're inside a platform like Facebook, you'll use a detailed targeting tool to search for like, well, what interests are available? And Facebook will put people in those groups based on how you interact with Facebook. For large part, what do you like? What do you share? What content do you interact with? That's how Facebook, for a large part, will decide what interests do you, as an individual, do you fit in? Okay, so we're going to group them together, and then the last part there is just, again, test and learn. Like, we don't have to have a perfect idea of exactly what's going to work. If we already had that, then you would be here. but we would have already nailed, all of our fundraising where we need to worry. So normally we'll kind of introduce like one group or one or two over the course of a campaign just to see, okay, we don't have any previous data on this particular group of interest. Let's kind of test out. Let's see if it works or not. And how does it work compared to my best performing ad sets or my best performing audiences so far? There will of course be a difference between your warm audience and your cold audience. Warm, especially donors and people who already know you, like leads or contacts, yeah, the cost, the efficiency for that group is going to be really high. Like they're going to donate at a much more efficient rate. It'll be much cheaper to get them to donate than people who don't know you or don't know your cause or don't know your story. In which case, we just kind of have to accept that, okay, to get a new donor is more expensive to get a donation from someone that already knows you. And we already know that through other channels as well. It's no different in digital. It's just we're trying to use the targeting available to find the best group within there. Okay. All right. So one other kind of point of these audiences is, I don't know, lukewarm, I guess you could call it, but it's kind of like between the two. And this is lookalikes. Now, a lookalike is where you create an audience inside Facebook. And it could be your donors, it could be people that went to a page on your website. And you're saying to Facebook and other platforms as well, it's not just Facebook that does this, but you're saying, hey, find me people like these people. That's why it's lookalike. And then we're going to target those people with this message. And again, this is one of those cases where Facebook needs a lot of information, a lot of data to be like, okay, here's this list of 1,000 donors. Here are the similarities I can see with those people. All right, I'm going to go and try and find more of those people for your campaign. That's the whole premise behind lookalike. Normally for an appeal, definitely I would test and just see, okay, I want to test those audiences, see if they can perform, how well do they perform compared to my warm groupings, my warm audience, how well do they perform compared to my cold audiences, and just see, is it worthwhile continuing or not? Again, digital, if it is not working, turn it off. It's not like you have to carry it through to the end of a campaign and put money into something that's not as efficient as other groups that are giving you a better return on your spend. Okay, so that's kind of a few things around grouping of your audiences. And again, how that kind of, just to visualize it, rather than just one ad set that contains everyone I want to target, it might be my donors, my people to my website, people who have no idea who I am and they're interested in a particular issue like breast cancer awareness. And it might be a lookalike group in there, rather than doing it all together, because it means those nice numbers that I particularly like to see, things like how many donations, donation revenue, cost per donation, average donation. Those numbers aren't broken down by audience if I just group everyone together. But if I split them out, then I can see those numbers by audience. And it gives me a better sense of, all right, these cold groups are great to continue. These ones aren't really that great. All the heavy lifting might be done by your warm list, and that lowers the average down. But it could be that you need to get rid of some of these cold audiences, these interest groups, because they're just not that efficient, and we need to test into new groups. Okay, so that's kind of why we talk about breaking out these audiences. All right, so testing your ads as well. So this is kind of another part. If we're testing who we want to see our ads, the second part there is, hey, how can we split test the actual ads themselves? And it might be something you've heard about or thought about, but not necessarily had the capacity to do. So testing, I guess, the first point is it doesn't have to be really complicated and onerous. You don't need to do a multivariate experiment with like 17 images and 5 bunches of text so that it creates hundreds of variations in there. What Facebook will do is it will show the ads that perform better to more people. Those ads will absorb more budget. So Facebook already is going to help the delivery of ads that do better. It kind of more or less helps with the test. So it can be as simple as just upload multiple ads. So it might be that you have 2 ads, the text is the same, the image is different, the headline is the same. You've just changed the image. That way, if there's a difference between the two, you can look at it and say, well, it's the image is the main thing that's different between those two, right? So we can infer that the image is the difference, and we can try and figure out, well, why is that? The numbers won't tell you why; it'll just tell you what happened. Okay, so Facebook will give more budget to the ads that are more efficient in your campaigns, in your ad sets. Okay, so that means we can upload multiple bits of creative. So it could be that these kind of few that I just took screenshots from Salvation Army would be, okay, they're trying out the carousel, and this is for their Christmas shop. They're trying out the carousel ad type. They're trying out a plain image that looks like a carousel, which is kind of interesting that they've flipped it. It's a single image ad, but they've made it look like a carousel. And then they have a few variations, which are just the single gift card as well. So they can see now on an ad by ad basis, which one performs better, which one gives a better cost per donation. What about click-through rates, engagement with the ads, all these kind of metrics, this full kind of breakdown is going to happen just because they've created a few variations there and got them loaded up. Facebook will report on all those numbers back so they can kind of see what's going on. And if you didn't know, there is kind of a tool, Facebook Ads Library. So it's just facebook.com/ads/library, where pretty much everyone's ads are available to see. Just kind of it's again a transparency tool by Facebook to say what ads different pages have in market. So sometimes we'll just go and see, check out what different campaigns people are running for context. Ones that kind of we've done in the past, and again, this wasn't for an appeal, but a lead gen campaign was just, we didn't know for this lead generation, okay, well, what image is going to resonate normal? Like what stands out? Like what's going to stop someone from scrolling as they're going through Facebook? Like is it, which one's going to be most efficient? So we're just kind of testing different variations on there. And again, we're only changing one element of some of these. So it's not necessarily a huge onerous task to do, but we're just coming up with some variations so we can see. And sometimes it's nice to have like one that is quite different, so you can see, okay, like does that one that's a little bit different perform better than ones that are in market? And again, without doing that, we wouldn't know that, yep, this kind of image, the one on the left performed the best to start with, but then its performance started deteriorating. We introduced new ads in market to try and make sure that there's not ad fatigue kind of happening, right? So we kind of put variations out there. So we're testing on Facebook. There's three main ways that we can do this. And I've done them in order of most of a hassle to like the least hassle, right? So the first kind of way we can do it is what's called an A/B test campaign, right? This is where you're going to get a lot of the metrics back of that you'll get with an experiment with like statistical significance, all this sort of stuff. But it is more fiddling around that you have to do through the interface with Facebook Ads Manager. The second one is dynamic creative, and that's where you would say, yep, this ad set is going to be dynamic, and you would load in the images and the text options. So you might have 3 images, 4, 5 images, might have 1 or 2 text options, and then Facebook will go and just combine them together and show people different combinations of those images with those text options. And it will then report back to you, oh yeah, these images did better and these bits of text did better as well. So you can kind of see the difference there. The third option, and again, limited for time, is just create the ads. Just create multiple ads and let them run in the same ad set. And if, again, you can just change that one thing. And this is kind of putting more trust. I don't know. I don't like to use words trust and Facebook in the same sentence, but more or less that's what we're doing. But that kind of lets Facebook and the algorithm just say, okay, it's going to put more money behind a particular ad once it sees that it performs better than the other one. Okay, and so it'd be like, yep, there's a better cost per click if it's traffic objective, or better cost per conversion, donation, if that's the objective, and it will put more of the budget behind that particular creative. Okay, so 3 levels of how to test. I'd say that the last one there is just the simplest to just set up. Dynamic creative can be interesting to play around with when you do have those multiple options. And again, don't try to do all of it at once. If you've never done any of it, don't start with the A/B test campaign. Just start by creating multiple ads, check out the dynamic creative, and then eventually, you could be like, okay, in 4 appeals time, that could be a year, that could be 3 months, depending on your organization. In that amount of time, then we want to be doing our testing through this mechanism. Okay, so you can scale up to use that option. All right, another thing we normally do with creative is just to update with to emphasize the urgency. So that's can really be done quite simply with even just some of the text that we'll see in campaigns. Particularly with tax, we'd often see a lot of those creative pieces updated right, in those last 4 days, to put all caps at the top, like the end of financial year, whatever it is, really emphasizing the timeliness of that campaign. So we might have ads in market, and we'll adapt the copy as it gets closer to the urgency kind of ramps up. So we're kind of mirroring where the appeal is in that kind of sense. Okay, so that's kind of a nice thing to do. Of just it can be the donate today that you see in the bottom left as the headline, or give now. Those kind of pieces to emphasize the urgency. And another one is a second gift. So this is a tactic where, again, I'm talking mainly about social here, but this is not just social to do. You could do it across email as well. But it is where you would take people that have donated to date. So it could be for this particular appeal, 1 or 2 weeks before, probably a couple of weeks at least before the end of the appeal, or at least the time of most urgency. So if it's tax campaign, it would be a couple of weeks before the end of June. And it would be a message to those people, say definitely a thank you, like a follow-up thank you and update on the appeal, with an additional ask in there. So hey, if you want to keep contributing, or if you want to contribute more, whatever the messaging is, that is not I'm not the creative team, but they definitely help with a lot of that. But it's just trying to emphasize how close to the target you are, or how important the appeal is and the urgency kind of behind it, to get that second gift, to get that second kind of donation coming through. And that's a really good time is towards the end of the appeal, towards the end of that campaign, the time of most urgency. So I've definitely seen people implementing that and just kind of boosting up the amount they can get out of an appeal. All right, paid search. Paid search is really kind of fascinating when it comes to appeals, and just who has what in market at what time. And if we have our appeals up, it's like, do we have a page up? And do we have a link to the page? So I just did a search. I was just kind of curious, for Christmas donation, like what's going to come up? And the Vinnies have a particular page for it already, Salvos as well do. I was kind of interested to see, okay, what copy do they have in the ad? Does it align with what I'm searching for? And then where are they actually taking me? Paid search for appeals, I find really kind of fascinating, because normally it's really focused. And there is this kind of interesting difference between how search and social operate. Okay, so search is great for people looking for a thing, and you're like, oh, here's my answer. Here's the thing. Here's the thing you're looking for, right? That is the environment in which search operates. Social it's a story, it's narrative. No one's looking for ads on social, and we're trying to interrupt them, stop the scroll, and be like, boop, here's this message, here's this thing, here's something that may interest you. Please engage with it. So the context behind them and I guess where people are at is really, really different between those two channels. Even though they're kind of put side by side a lot of the time, which is kind of a bit unfair in a lot of respects, because people come to those channels with really different intents. Paid search is a high intent channel. They're looking to do something. The main kind of focus parts, or the main parts that paid search, and again, paid mainly Google Ad Grants. You might have an actual paid account as well that you use, but let's kind of look at it through paid search with Google Ad Grants. So the first one is, okay, let's send people to our specific page, to our specific appeal page, right? And that's because I don't necessarily want people to go to the general donation page. Because the big question is, why am I going to pay for traffic? And again, pay is, if you're using Google Ad Grants, you're not quite paying for it, but it is a cost. It might be an opportunity cost, because maybe that traffic would get you something else. But why am I going to pay for traffic that's already looking for me? So if I search for donate salvos, why would I put an ad up for that if my organic result is going to be my general donation page? And the answer is that, well, you probably want to send people to the actual appeal. So rather than to the general donation page. Part of that is going to be because the copy, the imagery here, you can see it's really aligned to the time of year. It's got a really different focus on the subject, the person in the actual appeal itself, so the creative they're using. Another part will be, oh my gosh, my brain just stopped for a moment. Another part will be that quite often with appeal pages, we can do some of the customization on that page that we wouldn't do on a general page. Might be removing the navigation. And again, this screenshot doesn't convey, Salvo's has like another nav that appears really higher above the banner here, and they have like another nav on the left-hand side. But it might be on your site that, yeah, we can actually hide navigation on an appeal page that we're sending traffic directly to, but we can't hide navigation on a general donation page. So in that case, let's send people straight to the appeal page. Let's make sure they're getting to it. We know they're going to convert at a higher rate. And again, we can compare those numbers. But if we're getting high conversion rates from our appeal page, let's put as much traffic behind that as we can, even if people are already searching for our organization. So that's why, branded search, let's send people direct to our appeal page. The second part we might do there is also to protect our brand. So again, if someone's searching for Donate Christmas Salvation Army, and Salvation Army is coming up as the second result there. So, Mission Australia and Starlight are coming up in positions 1 and 3. Now, to be fair to Mission Australia and Starlight, it is unlikely, although totally possible, but it's not necessarily that they're targeting Salvation Army as a keyword, okay? That's definitely not the case and not what I'm saying. They could just be targeting Donate Christmas, and they're appearing because Google sees them as more relevant for that part of the search. Now, if I was Salvation Army, I'd be like, okay, cool, we need to appear higher for this. We need to increase our bids or whatever we need to do just to make sure we're coming up for that branded search. We need to kind of protect our area. If you haven't already, search for your brand in Google, search for your organization, search for Donate in your organization name, just to kind of see what sort of competitive space is appearing. You don't really want people just dropping off at that point. It's unlikely they necessarily will, but it is still possible. It's still possible that people will go to another site. Some people don't really check search results. They just do a search and click on the first result by default, and then they might then use the back button to kind of navigate back and try and find what they're looking for. Okay, so it is important to consider how people will behave through it. All right, so then the kind of third part that I had was people aren't necessarily searching for you. They might be searching for the cause itself. So this would be in particular for, say, an emergency appeal. So if it's Haiti earthquake, if it's the tsunamis, or if it's bushfires, whatever it is, people are searching for that. They might not necessarily know like who it is that is doing an appeal for it, but they might be searching for that one in particular. In which case, yep, this is great. This is where search really shines and does really, really well, because it's so focused on, like, there's clear intent. And you're answering that question really well. It's really laser focused on fundraising. It might be people that aren't aware of your organization, so it's new kind of donors coming in. So that's where search should be, shining through. If your organization happens to be in a space which does this sort of appeal, obviously not every organization does. All right. So just kind of talk a little bit about email and SMS and tiny bit on tracking, and then answer some kind of questions. So again, email, it could be like another two hours of conversations, but just kind of a couple of pieces to pull away. And the first one is personalization. So it doesn't have to just be hi first name, or dear Mr. Blah blah. Like, it can be a little bit more in detail, and ideally it's the content as well that's a little bit more focused and personalized by who it is we're emailing. So, recent versus lapsed donors, if it's leads versus donors, people who haven't donated versus people who have, and considering when or the frequency of donations. Hopefully we're able to just tailor the content. Again, it doesn't have to be massively different, but it should kind of speak to each of those audiences, rather than just one comm that goes out to everyone that speaks to every experience. So that's kind of something we do advocate for, and we do in our comms. Now, talking about personalization, that I kind of put the hi first name in there as a little, I don't know, joke, but one thing I have there is that chart, and that chart is actually open rate and click rate. And the interesting part is, so we see open rate, which is the blue, how it just kind of drops really kind of enormously from email 2 to email 3. And that's because email 1 and 2 had the first name in the subject line. Email 3 and 4 did not. So it did actually kind of, it does make a difference, even though I kind of joke about it, about that level of personalization. It does still contribute to results. Like, it does still work. And it is something that's important to keep doing. And I consider that, hi first name or first name in a subject line to be just, okay, that's now baseline. Let's get that. If we don't have it, let's get that in. And then later on, we can think about what other content are we personalizing? What other experiences can we do? Not every email has to be a designed email. It doesn't have to be with banner images and columns and everything. It can just be pretty simple in terms of what people see. All right, so when we're testing with email, because I spoke about testing with social, so I'll talk about testing with email. Most of the tools that we use for email, so most systems will have this built in. We'll be able to split test subject lines and email content as a built-in feature. When I talk about most systems, MailChimp, Campaign Monitor, Autopilot, the CRM systems like BBIS, I don't have as much experience with those, so I can't really talk to those, but I know that most of the email systems, like the email dedicated tools, will have this built in somewhere. And they'll be like this screenshot from Campaign Monitor where you put in your subject lines for each one. You'll set like how long do you want it to leave the experiment open for, and then it will pick the winner and send the rest of the emails to whoever else hasn't received that email. Okay, so they're pretty, it's not, again, not onerous, not time consuming to do. It can be pretty quick to set up. If you're looking to improve an open rate, you're looking to play with the subject, the send name, the send email address, and things like the preview text and when you send an email. So those are the factors that impact the open rate. If you're looking to impact the click-through rate, that's about the content in the email itself. Okay, so just kind of know that if you are doing a test, if you're trying to impact the open rate, if you're trying to impact the click rate, there's different things you're going to change based on what number, what metric you're trying to move. Okay, so just kind of be aware of that difference. And again, most systems will allow you to do a test on the content or do a test on something like the subject line, the preview text. You could set up 2 whole campaigns to kind of really play around with everything. But at least we know we have the tooling. That's not as much of an issue. With SMS, SMS is kind of something where it can be a little bit of out of scope or just out of scale of what organizations can deal with, again, depending on resourcing. These are great for just urgency, emphasizing urgency in your appeals. So when it's close to the deadline or the time of like highest urgency, that's when we can send an SMS. Now, these systems are actually, they're pretty simple to use now, as long as you have those mobile numbers. If you have mobile number and first name, fantastic. Something like Burst SMS, again, there are other providers out there. I'm not just picking one, and I definitely don't get like a referral or anything, but it's pretty simple to use. You upload your list, you create the SMS, you can schedule it in, done. Like it's out there and it's in the wild. Okay, so it'll send it out. It can manage if people reply to the number, it can manage all that stuff as well. So it's something that where it's kind of getting pretty close to being, manageable for a lot of organizations. And now a lot of the email tool providers will also do SMS. So something like Razorly will cover both. MailChimp has an option for postcards, bizarrely. I believe they have SMS in there as well. Autopilot will connect with other tools as well that can do SMS, or just grab your list and just use something like Burst SMS or another one where you can just send it out. All right, and just a couple of tips on websites. So internal linking. So again, for your time of appeal, most people do a really good job of, again, they'll do like a really high profile link from their homepage to their appeal. But don't forget about the highly trafficked parts of your website. Like, where are people landing on your website? So it might be that there's internal pages or whole sections of your website where you should check in your analytics, like what gets traffic, especially organic search traffic could be a really good potential, and just check, okay, yeah, people are landing on this page or people are getting to this page, but this page, maybe it kind of makes sense for us to put a link back to our actual appeal to give it more prominence across the website, not just on the homepage and like 1 or 2 other spots, but actually, yeah, we're gonna give it prominence in a few different places. With donation pages themselves, this is a pretty big thing. Like, this is a really big thing to break down. So I think this would be like another session we can look to do on donation page optimization, because there's a lot to be said for forms and the tricky parts about some of the providers out there and what can and can't be done. Again, connecting up, if you stay up to date with what they're doing, or if you wanted to contact us, then we can keep you in the loop on anything that happens in the future. I'd like to just finish up with one point about tracking, and this is a bit of a kind of a sticking point. So every tool that we use will collect its own metrics, and that I mean, like they have their own dashboards, they have their own reporting, and this creates a lot of like siloed data and just overwhelming amounts of information that we have to check and report on and see what's going on, which is really hard. Like it's hard to keep up to date with all these things. I think probably the one thing I'd just implore everyone to do is when using Google Analytics, and more than likely 99% of the people on this call are using Google Analytics, but when you are using it, make sure all the traffic that's coming to your website is tagged. And by that I mean you're using UTMs or campaign tagging for any paid traffic and any email traffic that's coming to your website from another source. If you don't know what campaign tagging is or what UTMs are, that's totally fine. Here's a link to a really good guide that goes into quite a lot of detail, and it's written in a really nice, approachable way. Okay, so if I have this information, if I have this campaign tagging, I can break down all the behavior on my website based on where people came from. So if we know how people get to the website, we can attribute their behavior back to the source. And if I have that information, if I have that level of detail, then I can answer all these really interesting questions. Things like, oh, cool, which channel was the most efficient? Like, was it my Facebook ads? Was it my Instagram? Was it my search or display or whatever else is going on? How did my email perform? All these kind of questions we have. What about different ads after they get to your website? Did one ad have a much higher conversion rate than another? Again, if I don't use tagging, I won't be able to, it's going to be harder to find out this information. Facebook would report it, but again, I might want to have that in Google Analytics as well. If people are going through a donation form, where do they drop out? And do people from different channels drop out at different places? That's kind of important to know, because it might be that you have to adjust or send people to a different form if they're from a different source, if that's kind of required, like a different type of landing page. An instance where I could see that is you might have a long form donation page, which has a lot more about the campaign, the introduction, the cause related information, and then gets to donation. It might be that people from email could go straight to donation. They don't need a lot of that context because it was in the email, right? So if we can see that difference, we can answer that question. And the kind of big one is about audiences and volume as well. So, these are interesting questions that if we're not getting the tracking right, if we're not kind of nailing that piece, it means we can't necessarily answer those questions. And again, if we're starting out with kind of the basics, basic social campaign, basic search, we've got some emails in place. The next thing I'm going to do is just make sure my tracking's there. And with Google, it's built in. It's a few clicks. We can set that up. With email providers, mostly it's pretty much automated. It's normally a checkbox. Facebook, we just got to make sure we're using UTMs. And again, if UTMs and campaign tagging as a concept is unknown, totally fine. Just go and when you grab a copy of these slides, just go to that link and you'll be able to read up a bit more on it. All right. So I know that was heaps of kind of talking, and now allow me to do more talking by answering questions. And I'll just kind of, we'll try to get to some questions, which are really small on my screen. One sec. All right. So we've got a few questions have come through. And one question is about if you want to test Facebook ads, and just their understanding was you might start with several versions of an ad, I assume, but then Facebook automatically decides which one is working and will serve only that one up. It feels like Facebook has more control than the advertiser or the nonprofit. Yeah, no, like that is, in a sense, yes. And normally I've seen Facebook can call that really quickly. So if I've got one ad set and I've got two ads, let's say I had like my total budget was, I don't know, $1,000, and I might want to see like, maybe I want to see like $100 or $200 in each ad before I'm comfortable making a call of like which one's more efficient. Now Facebook might make that call after $5 in each one, or it's like, yeah, this one's just way better, and mainly because it's can look at a lot more signals than we can. It's going to look at mountains of data compared to what you or I would be able to process. Now you can't at an ad level say at a minimum spend this amount. That doesn't really work with Facebook. You can do that in ad set, which is a group of ads, but not at an ad. So Facebook can call these ads really, really quickly, which is kind of, you know, sometimes I've kind of been a bit hesitant on that. Other times it's good that it does it. And we have at times we'll kind of limit the number of ads we have going live to start with. So we won't just push, you know, 20 ads live on day one and hope for the best. Unless we have an extremely large ad spend, we might just go live with you know, 4 or 5, you know, maybe 6 kind of ads, see how they perform. Ones that aren't performing that well, again, we'll see, and Facebook will see, and we might just turn them off. And we'll be like, cool, we've kind of made a decision on those once we have enough data, and it's run for a week or 2. We have enough data there to be confident that result is valid, and then, you know, we kind of make sure it's off in whichever ad sets we have. Then we might introduce additional ads to see how do they perform against the ones that are currently our best. So it is kind of a good call. Oh wait, does Facebook have more control? Yeah, I mean, kind of technically, because they are the algorithm is the beast of it. And that just operates in a way where we don't see the internal workings of it. So we do put a lot of trust into how that works. And I guess it's really important to consider when you're setting up a campaign is like, what is the objective? What are you trying to do in the campaign? And that's the first option when you set up a campaign, which is, what's the objective? Is it to get traffic to your website? Is it to get people to engage with the ad, with the post, or to get a type of conversion? And normally I'd be like, what's the type of conversion? It's a donation. Sometimes we've had to choose traffic when there aren't enough donations. And I don't like doing that, but we sometimes do have to do that just to get people to come to the website. But when you choose the objective in Facebook, what you're saying to Facebook is, get people who are more likely to do this thing. Get people who are more likely to engage with my post, or get people who are more likely to go to my website, or get people who are more likely to do this conversion, donation. Okay, so choosing those different options changes quite a lot about who Facebook will show the ad to. Because if this person has never clicked on an ad before, shows no interest in nonprofits, but they're inside your audience targeting, then it's just not going to, it's far less likely to show the ad to that person, right? Because it's optimized delivery. Okay, so, but it is a good kind of question to look at. Okay, sorry, I am kind of going through questions. I think we've probably got time for one more, which I'm trying to find. Okay. Okay, so there's a question, our digital agency just seems to serve up all our social ads to people over 50 years old, and then lets Facebook choose which one of the ad set works best. It's frustrating because we have no knowledge of which audiences are responding to which ads, text or images. If we're using an agency, what's the bare minimum that we should expect in terms of delivery and meaningful metrics? Okay, so yeah, there are times where we'll also create what we call like a general population grouping, where we'll be like, okay, over a certain age, 50 is kind of one. Like I try to stick to the age bands that are in Facebook reporting, but 50 is kind of okay. That you could do, and then it's just like literally people over 50, and we might choose a particular geographical or gender, but more or less it's general population. Again, Facebook kind of works well when there's lots of data. So sometimes we'll see that particular ad set can perform well, but we want to have it in context to other ones that are tighter, that are more controlled, that we have more data on. So yeah, if you have an agency or you're working with whoever it is that's just kind of doing like, oh cool, there's one group, it's people over 50, that's all we're doing. It's like, well, again, that would be a consideration if you have a very low budget. Like if you have a couple of $100 or like $100, then I'd be like, okay, cool, let's be really focused. But if you have more than that, then it does open up, okay, let's do an interest grouping over here and age and potentially gender versus just age, but general population. Your ads, ad reporting as well. So within that ad set, you will have like the ads and how they've kind of performed. If you want to match up which ads have performed with which ages, then that's where it gets like, then you need to kind of split out your ad sets to target people at different ages. So that's where it becomes a bit more to manage in terms of the whole Facebook ad system, which can add time. So I can't, again, I'm not sure about like what the spend is and why it was set up in that way, but as long as you have access to Facebook, I always kind of advocate for the client should have access to the ad account, because then you can always just double check and see what's going on, or pull out information if you need it, or take over something if you need to. So that's always an option, hopefully, for yourselves. Grant, I might pause there. I know there are more questions which we'll download, but yeah, I also realize we've reached the time. And thank you for everyone to listen in.
Thanks, Tim. That was really, really good. I hope everybody enjoyed that. Guys, please do hang on for the end of the presentation, because we will be sending out a survey that will allow you to help us to improve and provide the webinars and sessions that you really need. So please do hang on. We've got people popping up to say thanks, Tim. Fabulous session, great session. Maria says thank you. So lots of happy people. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody. Stay on for the survey, and aside from that, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your days.
All right. Thank you.